The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Weekly Forecast.
Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for March 21st through the 25th of 2022. Okay, we'll start off with the Nzd USD pair. This is a weekly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this move up right here, starting from this range right here, was solely based on momentum, in the long term I'm short biased, right back down to this pivot low right here. However, since the daily bias is long, in the short term I am long biased, right back up to this pivot high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months. So the last weekly short trade that formed was right here. And then about 2 months later, there was a long trade that formed. And this short trade was stronger than this long trade. So at this point, the bias was short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And that main target was hit right here. And so at the current moment, I'm waiting for another weekly long trade to form so I can measure the strength of it against this previous short trade and then further decide a weekly bias whether long or short. Okay, and moreover, last week, I took several trades in these areas right here. That's based on the daily bias. So let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart, the last long trade that formed was right here. The last short trade that formed was right here. Now this short trade was stronger than this daily long trade. So the bias was short. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. So if you recall last week, I took a short entry at the 68.50 levels, roughly in these areas right here, with the stop loss at this pivot high. However, as the week progressed and price fell down to these levels, there was short-term long strength kicking back in on the lower time frames. And so on the Communities tab, I mentioned I had boarded the entire short entry, roughly at 67.90. And then moreover, as price reached these levels right here, it was possible that this daily short trade hit its main target roughly in these areas right here. And so on the midweek analysis, I was mentioning I would be taking a long entry, for this bias has changed into long. Or in other words, price was now likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. Okay, so let me just show you how I entered and managed that long trade roughly in these levels last week. So let's go over to the 1 hour chart. Okay, so on this 1 hour chart, in the midweek analysis, I was mentioning this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. And if you recall, I mentioned there was a breakout, an immediate break back in on this trend line, signaling normal short strength. And so I was mentioning if price reaches that pivot high right here, where that normal short strength was created, that will signify short-term strong long strength, and that I will be entering a long position at this level with a stop loss at this pivot low right here. Now on that same day, as price reached up to these levels right here, there was actually 15-minute lower confirmation of short-term strong short strength that formed roughly in these levels. And so I aborted that entire long position at these levels. Now the reason why I aborted this long trade at these levels right here is because typically when you're trading a higher time frames bias, in this case a daily bias, I would typically put the stop loss below the pivot low of the time frame that the bias formed on. In this case will be the daily chart in this area right here. However, if you recall, I said I'll place it at this level right here. Now the reason being is because the target in this case is roughly around here. So that's about 120 pip target. So if I place my stop loss at the traditional level, at this level right here, well, that would mean I'll be risking about 60 pips, which decreases the lot sizes I could take in this long entry. However, if I put the stop loss at this level right here, with that entry at this point right here, I was able to enter 3 times the amount of lots for this long entry. And since I was trading aggressively on this pair, I opted for this option. Now there are times when price just keeps going up right to its daily bias's target without stopping out the lower time frames price level where that long strength was created. However, in that case, there cannot be any signs of short-term short strength all along this move up right up to that daily bias's target. However, at this point right here, those 15-minute strong short strength confirmed, and so I aborted this long entry. Okay, so let me just show you that 15-minute lower confirmation, which told me to abort this long entry. So let's go over to the 15-minute chart. Okay, so on this 15-minute chart, I enter that long entry roughly around here with a stop loss at this pivot low, and on the initial move up, price looks strong. However, if you look at this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, there was a breakout and immediate break back in, signaling normal long strength. However, price came right back down to stop out that pivot low, showing that even stronger short strength kicked back in. And so at this point right here, I aborted this long entry. Okay, so just keep in mind, when you're trading these biases, there's aggressive entries and conservative or normal entry styles. Okay, so let me just wrap this up on the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart at this point, the bias is long, so price should reach at least this pivot high right here. And after that target is reached, again, I'll be waiting for another short trade to form so I can measure the strength of it against the previous long trade that still formed at this level and come up with another daily bias, whether short or long. And I'll keep you guys updated with this. Okay, so let's go on to the Euro-Yen pair. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of weekly biases and lower confirmations, please watch my price action trading course. For that course is designed to provide you the necessary information so you can understand how to trade price action. Okay, this is a weekly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So in 2020 at this point right here, there was a long trade that formed. Then last year at this point right here, there was compact short price action that formed, which shows strong short strength. So in the long term, I am short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. And moreover, this week, there was actually a new long trade that formed on this weekly chart, which in my opinion is still weaker than this compact short price action that formed right here. So in the short term, I'm also short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months. So again, in 2020, there was a long trade that formed right here. Then last year at this point, there was compact short price action which shows strong short strength. So the weekly bias was short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And so in the latter part of last year, as price came up to these levels, although price was going up, the lower time frames were not confirming this long move. And so that formed a great short entry opportunity with a stop loss at this pivot high right here. And then price fell all the way back down to these levels where it had trouble getting through a monthly gap level that runs right through these areas. And so again, price pulled all the way back to these levels, while again, the lower time frames were not supporting this long move. And so if you recall, I took multiple short entries all in these areas with a stop loss at this pivot high right here. And now at this point, I still have the full position still short from the last short entry I took. For although there are many signs of long strength, in my opinion, they are slightly off in terms of short-term long strength. Okay, so the weekly bias is still short in my opinion. So if I do get further pullbacks or any signs of short-term short strength kicking back in, I'll be willing to take further short entries, again with the stop loss at this pivot high. However, one thing that changed with this setup at this point is that this week there was a new long trade that formed. And so at this point, the main target will be at this pivot low, and this original target all the way down here will be through extension targets. Okay, so first of all, let me show you these price setups that are showing long strength, however, in my opinion, are not quite up to par. So let's go over to the daily chart. Okay, so on this daily chart, try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. As you can see right here, there was a breakout and a break back in, which typically shows normal short strength. However, as you can see, price came right back up to hit the pivot high where that short strength was created, thus creating even stronger long strength. Okay, so this is a typical trendline breakout confirmation of long strength. However, in my opinion, the close of the breakout candle and the open of the break-in candle has roughly 6 pips in between it. In my opinion, that is slightly too much for this to be a legitimate confirmation, albeit it is very close. Okay, and the second reason is this V-shaped recovery on this daily chart. As you can see, this is a rather clean V-shaped recovery, especially if you look at it on the 4-hour chart. However, a V-shaped recovery, in my opinion, only shows long strength if it is accompanied by a trendline breakout. So let me just zoom out here. Now in this case, there are no legitimate trend lines to create a breakout which could possibly accompany this V-shaped recovery. Alright, so that's the other reason why I think this long strength on these lower time frames are not up to par to be a confirmation of short-term long strength, and thus I am still short biased. Okay, but that said, there was 1 hour confirmation of long strength this week, so let me go ahead and show you that. Let's go over to the 1 hour chart. Okay, so on this 1 hour chart, if you guys recall, I was mentioning all throughout this move up, there was normal long strength confirmed through price patterns in this area right here and also this area right here. However, 2 days ago, there was actually strong long confirmation formed on this 1 hour chart. So let me go ahead and show you that. Okay, so try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. As you can see, there's a breakout, an immediate break back in, signaling normal short strength. However, price was able to override that by reaching the pivot high where that normal short strength was created, signaling short-term strong long strength. Okay, so this is legitimate confirmation of long strength at this point. So I will be needing a 1 hour or 4 hour confirmation of short strength to take further short entries for this weekly buy. So let me show you what I'll be looking for. Okay, so the first thing I'll be looking at is this fake 1 hour double top that form right here. Now if this double top can hit its target height level before reaching the second top stop loss level right here, so if price can do something like this, I guess, that will signal short-term 1 hour short strength that can override that strong long strength that formed here, and thus confirming that weekly short bias. Okay, so that's one thing I'm looking at, and there's another one I'm looking at on the 4 hour chart, so let's go over there. Okay, so on this 4 hour chart, try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. So in this case, if price could break this out and immediately break back in, that'll show 4 hour normal long strength. However, if price could fall right back down to that pivot low, well, that will show that even stronger short strength was able to override this normal long strength, thus create 4 hour strong short strength. And so at this point, I would take another short entry also, again with the same risk parameters as earlier. Okay, so let me just wrap this up on the weekly chart. Okay, so on this weekly chart, again, that stop loss level is right here. And so at this point, like I mentioned earlier, if there's signs on the 1 hour and the 4 hour chart of strong short strength, I will be taking short entries with a stop loss at this pivot high right here. But moreover, even if it does not form, and if there's no further short-term long strength created and price just hovers up here, I may take another short entry simply based on the idea that in my opinion this weekly bias is still short. Now I'll only be taking this entry without confirmation with minimal risk, so I will need price to reach these 133 levels up here. Okay, so I'll keep you updated with this one on the midweek analysis. Alright, so let's go on to the dollar yen. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this horizontal trend line right here that was formed from this monthly huge doji right here is a strong level, and since price has a tendency to want to test strong levels, in the long term I'm short biased right back down to this horizontal trend line right here. And moreover, on this recent move up all the way up to these levels right here, there was no confirmation of strong strength on the lower time frames. So in the short term, I'm also short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. Let me run you by the setup I've been looking at for the past couple of months. So in mid last year at this point right here, there was a strong short trade that formed. Then a week-long trade formed right here. And so at this point, the bias was short. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. However, as price ranged about in the coming months, there was a new monthly trend line that formed right through these levels that became a target for this last weekly short trade. And so at this point, the bias became long. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And that main target was hit right here. And then furthermore, as price came up with extension targets all the way up to these levels, there was actually another strong short trade that formed. And then the following week, a week-long trade that formed. And so the bias was initially short. However, again, this short trade hit its target through a monthly gap level that runs right through these levels right here. And so again, the bias changed into long. Or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And that main target was hit right here. Then furthermore, for the past 2 months, price has really just been ranging about, not showing any long strength or short strength, nor any biases. And then for the last 2 weeks, price just jetted all the way up to these levels. However, with no legitimate strength on the lower time frame that supports this long move. And so at this point, since this long move is not supported by the lower time frames, at the current moment, I'm looking for a daily or weekly short entry, with this main target being at this pivot low right here, where this long move started. So let me show you some levels on the monthly chart that can possibly form these daily and weekly short entries for this move all the way back down. So let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, first of all, I'll try drawing this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. Okay, so this legitimate trend line right here does provide some short-term short strength, but more or less there's another level that provides more short strength, and that's a gap level. So let me just zoom in here. Okay, so that medium gap on this monthly chart is right here. Let me just show you the levels for that. Okay, so the upper level of the gap will be at 119.747, and the lower end of the gap will be at 118.69. Okay, so since that monthly trend line, and even more, this monthly gap does provide relatively strong short strength, I will be watching for a daily or weekly short trade to form in these areas, so I could take a short entry right down to the pivot low where this long move started, however without any confirmation on the lower time frames of long strength. Okay, so I'll keep you guys updated with this setup also. Alright, so that's it for the weekly forecast. I hope you guys have a great week. And thanks for watching, guys. Okay, bye.